Mrs. U Nation, aka Savage Armor Jim Giraffe, coming at you with another episode of Dark Device. Today, we're going to be talking about Gredora. I've been trying to figure out what I was actually going to say about Gredora. It wasn't like the one that was on my mind the most, but it's kind of sort of hard to explain. So, my thing with Gredora is I remember when she first came out and when like everything in that particular set came out, I was talking about how this was the best Mega Colony support that we had. Um then like the expectations versus the reality came, or I guess it was just the fact that the format changed quite a bit. I'm not going to say it was bad, but then I started to notice some things that was a little bit off about Gredora. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. She's still, in my honest opinion, part of like the best support that we had, especially seeing that she's able to easily get more than three attacks in compared to all the other versions of Mega Colony where they have to fight for that fourth and sometimes fifth attack. My thing with Gredora is the cradle marker mechanic. The cradle marker mechanic's actually pretty good. Don't get me wrong, but it does have some problems. I feel like that the cradle marker mechanic defeats itself, and is hard. Like I said, it's something that's hard to explain. So, the cradle marker mechanic. Once a unit is hit with the cradle marker, they cannot intercept, they cannot boost, they cannot use their abilities, and their original attacks is zero. And once it gets retired, the Mega Colony player gets to search out for a grade, for a card with the same grade from their deck and put it to their hand. So you basically get field control and hand advantage into one mechanic. Now, the thing that I feel like that Gredora defeats herself is when you don't distribute cradle markers at all. And let's be real, you go against a deck like, let's say, Grand Blue or Pale Moon or whatever. Those are two decks, for a prime example, that can create a full field on their turn, and at the end phase, they can put everything back into their respective places so they no longer have a field. When that happens, then the cradle marker thing becomes a problem because not only all of your hand advantage and field advantage is coming straight to the cradle marker, but the whole system, like as far as the aggressiveness of the system, it all starts to fall apart. And that's why I said the cradle marker mechanic defeats itself, because when you go against a deck like that where they can actually play tempo and make it to where you can't necessarily distribute any cradle markers at any given time, that's when the problem starts. That, in my honest opinion, that's not only when the problem starts, but that's also like where everything starts to fall apart. For a prime example, you look at Nymph. I still don't even know how to say her name. You still have Nymph, and you have Sticky Bolus. Now, Nymph, as long as there's a cradle marker on the field, she's a plus 6k. So she's a 15k beat stick on your turn as long as there's a cradle marker on the field. Or your opponent's side of the field, I should say. With Sticky Bolus, she gains 6k for each cradle marker that's on your opponent's side of the field, and if she gets 20k or higher, you draw a card. Now, my thing is that you don't necessarily have to have cradle markers in order to get that draw power from the 20k. She just needs to be 20k, and it's a lot easier to do that with the cradle markers. But I've seen and I've play tested at particular times where your opponent doesn't have like any cradle markers on the field, or they can like play around the mechanic and whatnot. And it does become a problem, especially with Sticky Bolus, because I definitely feel like that if you're not hitting that 20k threshold, um, it kind of feels like you're wasting her potential. Like I kind of feel like that using her ability to get that draw should be almost every time you use Sticky Bolus. Like that should basically be a thing, but that's just me. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but in my personal opinion, if you're not getting that draw when she attacks, you're kind of wasting her potential. Like I'm not even gonna lie on that. Now, to be fair, there is a thing called Soul Blast Management, where now because, for a prime example, interlude scissors exist, that now you have to share Soul Blast with Interlude now. So now there's going to be a times, and I've been in this situation where you have to decide on if you want to get that extra draw or do you want to get that extra attack. Like that's just the way I see it. I don't know about everybody else though, but sometimes you just have to not get that draw power and just so interlude could actually restand, sticky bolus or something like that, or whatever other rear guard you do, because getting more than three attacks is very essential. It's a must in my honest opinion. So honestly, sticky bolus, uh she has to share now. It's not like how it was prior to clan selection, where your only soul blasting basically came from her, so you can just soul blast as much as you want and not really like care about it. But anyway, um I feel like that one of the major issues with the cradle marker mechanic is definitely the fact that you can't distribute markers during your opponent's turn. Now I understand that it is a standard format, so it's a little bit understandable why you can't do that. And I'm definitely hoping that Premium Collection 2021, our stride allows us to distribute tokens, or allows us to at least force your opponent to call a card if there's no rear guards on the field, so that you can make so you can make the cradle markers. But at the same time, man, not gonna hold my breath on that. I'm gonna be real with you. After that shit that they pulled in Premium Collection 2020, I don't think I'm really going to hold my breath on Mega Colony getting a good stride. I'm gonna just be real with you on that. It's not necessarily that particular card's fault though, but that card was so bad that nobody, not even experts of Mega Colony, not even experts of premium format, tried to figure out what's the purpose of that card. But we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about Gredora today. Anyway, I definitely feel like that distributing markers is definitely should have been a thing during your opponent's turn, or at least forcing your opponent to call cards to the field when there's no field presence. Now I know some people gonna be all like, "Oh, well, that would be completely busted, and you just being biased because you want to make County be like tier one." Nah, that's not necessarily biased. You want to know why? Because Nubatama could do that. Nubatama has the ability to force your opponent to call something from hand, force your get a token. What is it? The Mask of Domination token, just by removing something from the player's graveyard or field and getting a card with a possible drive check if there's two or more Shiranuis in the soul. How was that bad? And how was that not broken? This is all in standard format, by the way. If this was like old school premium format with the whole domination mechanic and Rene running around, I can kind of understand. But the thing I'm talking about, that's all in standard format. So if they can have a way to force you to discard cards, force you to call something to the field so that they can use that stupid crow, I can't really say that stupid crow because I also run Nugatama, but that's beside the point. And also have the ability to force you to bind something from the drop zone in or field just so they can get a copy of said card with a potential drive check or two. How come Mega Colony can't have a way to force your opponent to call something to the field so that um we can distribute cradle markers? Like, I feel like, in my honest opinion, that's fair. And that definitely is something that should have happened, but it didn't. And I was like, okay, well, maybe next time we get support, but Pimp Standard is dead. Well, it's not really dead, but now we have V Standard, and now we're going into Overdress. So now we can't necessarily be like, oh, we'll just wait until more Cradle Marker stuff comes out. That's not necessarily the case no more. And I can definitely tell we're probably not going to get any more Cradle Marker stuff because writing Clan Selection Volume 1, we got yet another mechanic. So, I don't know, man. I feel that's complete BS. But anyway, uh, overall, it's a good mechanic, but it kills itself. I definitely hope that we do get an improvement for Gredora sometime soon, whether it's complete premium or it's V standard or whatever. But anyway, if I had to choose how to actually, if I was to actually to improve Gredora, or if I was to actually change something, that whole thing about calling something. Now, I didn't necessarily say where to call something from. Like, they don't necessarily have to be like, oh, you get force call something from hand. No, 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 that's not necessarily the case. I think it would be perfect if you would have forced your opponent to call something from either the drop zone or the soul. And the reason why I feel like that would have been interesting is because, for one, um there's only certain decks that definitely needs their own soul. So outside of that, you're not necessarily completely ruining somebody's strategy if you're calling something from soul. Because, like, unless if you're playing like Pale Moon or Dark Irregulars or Genesis, you're not really going to care what somebody gets from the soul at the end of the day. And then there's gonna be like a few cards here and there where it's like, oh, you have to have this amount of card in the soul. Those are the decks that's gonna be like worried about that though. But there's not enough of it in order for it to be problematic. And if you call something from the drop zone, that's definitely not something problematic because it's already in the drop zone. Unless you playing Grand Blue, you don't really have too much of a problem with it at the end of the day. Because I know, like, at the end of the day, Bushiroad's not going to make it to where you get to call a cradle marker, give out a cradle marker during your opponent's turn. So that's like the next best thing, in my honest opinion. But with that being said, let's get on to the deck list. I'll see you there. Alright, so you kind of notice that this Gredora deck list is a little bit all over the place. This is because I feel like Gredora is more of a toolbox deck, and I feel like that's like the direction to go. But the second thing you will also notice is that, unlike the machining build in the mill mechanic build, this one is running 4 heals, 9 criticals, and 3 draws, whereas the other two was running 6 draws, 6 criticals, and 4 heals. This is basically because, unlike the other two, this one has decent hand advantage with the help of the cradle marker mechanic. Not only that, you do want to keep some other stuff inside the deck so you can actually have Gredora call them out, which is actually pretty good in my honest opinion. Plus, you can basically use one of every single PG too, because again, the grade 1 PG can be searched out with the cradle marker mechanic. But we are also running protect one, so you don't necessarily need to have three draw trigger PGs, which is why you see that one sentinel crit. I feel like that this is like kind of sort of the best like aggressive way to go with Gredora. I kind of want to do something similar to this with a Venom Stinger, but I highly doubt it'll like work. I'm gonna do some testing like a little over the weekend, and if it works, then I'll definitely put it like this. Otherwise, nah. But anyway, Venom Stinger, you obviously see, and then Interlude Scissors, you see. This is basically because, like I said, like in the last video, these two are so good cards that they can basically go into any like mega colony build and not really minus, and the synergy will still be there for some odd ass reason. But anyway, moving on to the grade 1 lineup, you notice we have like 3 Clear Breeze and 3 of the grade 3 Searcher. And this is because we do need Interlude Scissors into the grave, so we do have a way to search out for them via grade 3 Searcher, a little Dorcas. And if we have to discard something, we'll obviously discard him. And then Clear Breeze gives a cradle marker mechanic when you or gives a cradle marker to one of your opponents if you discard a grade 3. But regardless, when she's placed on Vanguard or Rear Guard, you discard a card and you draw a card. That's basically how it goes. We don't run too many grade 2s in the deck, so sometimes there are going to be times we don't have a grade 2, but you do have that Clear Breeze, and you just discard a card in order for you to get one of the grade 2s. I mean, to draw a card just so you can get into one of those grade 2s. But outside of that, it's the only, you also got to remember that this is the only way to make a cradle marker without doing a counterblast of some kind. As long as you discard a grade 3, you can give out a cradle marker. Then we have 2 butterfly officers. Basically because you see like the 4 high class mobs, we don't necessarily need to depend on butterfly officer when it comes to unflipping damage. So she's still there because she's still pretty good. But like I said, like you're never going to be running her at a full playset anyway. It's always going to be like what, 2 to 3. In this particular case too. And I guess part of that is also because I have Megalar Lancer in there too. But mostly because the high class Moth is pretty good at the end of the day. What's her face? Butterfly Officer is just there just for the soul charge as well. But anyway, moving on to the grade 2 lineup, you have your typical Machining Mantis at 4, and then you have Sticky Bolus, which I feel like is the MVP of the deck as far as grade 2s go, because she's able to get a possible draw when she attacks. Plus she if she's 20k or higher, like I mentioned before. And even when she first came out, I was like, yo, technicality, you should just put this in almost every single version of Mega Colony. So like that's Mill Mechanic and possible Venom Stinger included as well. But she's there also to search out for Dark Face. So like basically both your grade 2s besides Megalar Lancer will search out for grade 3s. It's just that she in particular searches out for Dark Faces. Last but not least, we have Megalar Lancer. Basically more for the Venom Stinger combo, but at the same time, it is a pretty decent card to soul charge something into. It also prevents your opponent from soul charge. I mean, not soul charge. It prevents your opponent from intercepting as well, so that's another good thing as well. But overall, he's just there just because of the Venom Stinger combo. And kind of sort of the Gredora combo as well. But then we get on to our grade 3s, where we have Gredora, obviously. We basically have about, let's see, Four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. We have about like 11 grade threes that we can search out for. Um, it's 14 if you count the other three Gredoras. We have like 14 like total grade threes that we can search out for via deck just for Gredora's skills. So that's actually pretty good. I also got to remember that since high class Moth is also in the deck, you can also search out for him and call him to the rear guard circle. That's not completely a bad move. It'll be there just so you can create a decent amount of column, or you can just have him attack on his own. But that's basically up to you. But anyway, you see like all the other grade threes that we have. We have one dark face. The only reason why we're only running one dark face is because he does cost a counter blast in order to use his ability. And despite the ability being good, it basically all comes down to if your opponent has cradle markers on the field or not. If your opponent doesn't have cradle markers on the field, he kind of sort of just dies. And he kind of sort of just becomes a 22k beast stick without really doing anything whatsoever, which is the reason why we're running him at 1. But then we also have Cyclomatube, which is actually a pretty good card. We've seen him also at 1 in the Mill Mechanic deck as well. So I mean, he's an overall pretty good card, especially his like rear guard ability where he's able to get a possible built-in crit, and he forces your opponent to mill the top card of their deck, so that's also a good thing as well. Venom Stinger is there just to be our finisher. Like instead of having what's his face? Instead of having Antlion, we have Venom Stinger altogether. So basically, what you're doing is going into Gredora first, and then when your opponent's like at 4 or 5 damage, you're obviously going to go into Venom Stinger. Because remember, whenever Venom Stinger uses ability and the attack hits, if they're at 4 or 5 damage and they hit that heal, they're not going to heal. They just instantly lose. So that's instantly GG if they're at 5 damage or whatnot. But then you also make it to where Interlude Scissors also has a way of coming into the battlefield from the grave as well. But even if you don't get into Gredora first and you run into Venom Stinger first, it's not completely bad. I just kind of feel like that Venom Stinger is wasted if your opponent only has 1 damage. Like, in my honest opinion, playing Venom Stinger, like just the deck as a regular or just Venom Stinger as a whole in any type of deck, I feel like the worst case scenario is your opponent has 1 damage. Because I feel like that there's no way for you to plus off of it. Your opponent is obviously going to take the hit, and unless if you get like double critical, it's not really going to matter too much at the end of the day. So anyway, so we have him as the finisher, and then we also have Interlude, and you notice that we have 1 Hell Demise. And the 1 Hell Demise is because, like I mentioned earlier, with the inclusion of Interlude Scissors, him and what's her face and Sticky Bolus is fighting for the Soul Blast. They're basically fighting for the Soul Blast. They're all like, oh, I want to use it. No, it's my turn to use it. And it's definitely going to get up to that point where you have to decide if you're going to use your last Soul Blast on either Sticky Bolus's effect or Interlude Scissors effect. And this is where Hell Demise come in. Hell Demise basically restands something for free, just like he was doing prior to Interlude Scissors existing. So you basically don't have to worry too much about Soul, and he's basically like the last resort at the end of the day. Now, originally I was running the order card, Aspirations of Limitless Power. So basically what this card does is you put a normal unit from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck, and you draw a card if it's a grade 3. This was how you recovered all of your Hell Demises. That was basically the way. But now that we have high class Moth, that's able to recover stuff and put it to the bottom of the deck. We don't necessarily need the order card. The order card, to be honest, when I was doing this deck list at first, that's originally where Hell Demise was. The place where Hell Demise was, that's where that order card was. But after playing and play testing the deck, I started to notice like there's really no point in me playing the order card. But if you want to play the order card, go ahead. It's not really that bad. I just feel like ever since High Class Moth came out, there was really no point in using it. But that's it for the deck list. Tune in next week where we talk about Venom Stinger. But for now, my name is Z Nation, aka Salvage Armor Juncho Rafa, signing out.